Do you feel like turned on by yourself now? Like I wanted to ask you that because some of your comments lately, I'm like,
oh my God, yes. Oh.
Welcome to Sweet Release Podcast with me, Barbie Jean. Hi, sweets. Welcome back. I'm so excited. I have Miss Vudu here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I would love to know, where does the name Vudu come from? What does that mean? Like, it's so beautiful.
Thank you. It's actually a funny story. So when I was younger, I have always been obsessed with like dolls and how they looked. And then I think like as I got older, I sort of like had this like idea of like perfection and beauty. And I thought that would be like, I guess, the key to my happiness. And so I think like over time, I was like, okay, like I wanted to have like an alter ego. And initially I was thinking of like Barbie or like doll or something like that. But then I figured Barbie was, I don't know. I don't know if I really resonated with it. And so I was thinking like, okay, like what else can I call myself that has like the word doll in it? And then I was like kind of going through like all the things and I was like, oh, voodoo doll. And then I also remembered that like I'm Creole. So then like the whole like doll with the needles and then the fact that I'm a tattoo artist and I stick needles in people, I get needles, stuck in me. And so it kind of just like fit together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just kind of, I stuck with it.
Love that.
Yeah. It was like right before I moved here and I was like, oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, I need new identity. Right before I moved here to LA.
Cool. Yeah. You also like your pronouns on your Instagram are they, them. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like, could you describe why you kind of identify with that? Yeah.
So I came from a pretty like sheltered, very like restricted, childhood. And so like when it came to like gender and identity, it was pretty binary for me. But at the same time, like I never really resonated with that. I didn't have the language at the time to like describe like who I was. And so for a while I was like, okay, I don't really identify as like female. I don't really identify as male. And I tried both and it just never fit. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm something like in between. And it kind of just went through this like evolution. And then I had a friend who also identified as non-binary. And I was kind of like listening to how they were describing it. And that's when it clicked. That's when I realized like, okay, like this is what I definitely identify as. Like, I feel like it's something that I don't have to keep searching, I guess, to describe myself. And this is what feels most comfortable to me.
Cool. I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So do you often kind of tap into kind of masculine energy in a way? Or do you, because I've only ever seen you feminine, I think, on your Instagram.
So like when I was trying to figure out like who I was, I did at some point wear a lot of like boys' clothes. And I mean, I was really trying to figure out who I was, but at the same time, my brain kept thinking in like these very binary terms. And it was interesting. Like there was a time when I used to wear like baggy clothes and I wore like a tie and I just felt so uncomfortable. And I couldn't tell if it was because it was like masculine clothing and I didn't feel like it like fit with me. And then I realized, I think I present myself as very femme, but I definitely have some like, I guess like masculine characteristics because I also identify as pansexual. So it's interesting when I'm with like a male partner versus a female partner or non-binary partner, how I am and my being is very different. Like I have like different parts of myself that comes out depending on the partner that I'm with. And then as far as like dressing goes, I don't like to wear clothes, so I try to wear as little as possible. And I feel like dresses kind of like give me the opportunity to wear as little as possible.
Love that. Yeah, they're so flowy and comfortable.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Speaking of sexuality, I love that you, I knew that before talking to you today and meeting you that you have been with everyone across the gender spectrum. But could you describe what it was like to go home with a woman for the first time for you?
Yeah. So the very first time it happened, oh my gosh. And it was very interesting. So I was about maybe 20. And I was dating this guy who was my very first boyfriend. And he and I got invited to this party, and it was very interesting. It was actually it was nothing but Russians. We were the only non-Russians there. And at this party, I was invited by this girl. So at the time I was in art school, and she was one of the models that I would use for like some of my designs and stuff. And I've always had like a huge crush on her. And so when she invited, I was like, oh my God, I was super excited. And, to be honest, like after like a few shots, like it just kind of happens, like, but it was with me and my ex at the time. And we were just like in bed, and everything we were super drunk, and it was kind of awkward. But
first times usually
yeah, first
are.
time. Yeah. And I don't know, it was like, after I had and that guy that I was with, he was my only partner that I'd ever been with. So when I met him, I was a virgin. And so it was just, so to go from that to like being with women, it was just like, wow, like, okay, I think I definitely do like women. I've always loved women, but I wasn't sure until like after I had like that first experience. And then it just kind of like went from there. Yeah, it was weird because I always sort of like identified as lesbian too when I was younger. But again, it's like that whole binary thing. And so being with her made me realize like, okay, I definitely like women. And so for a while, I kind of wanted to just like pursue that.
So is that what you did for a while, is just pursuing women? Like, what was your sexual journey like
oh my
after
God.
that?
It was, so I was really awkward. And I kind of blame this on the fact that I was like really awkward, and I was so sheltered growing up, like, and I didn't know at the time, but, I am autistic. And so it just kind of explained why I had such a difficult time connecting with people, making friends, and especially when it came to like dating and flirting and things like that. It was horrific. There would be times where, I would try talking to a girl, and then it just, I'll just say I got rejected a lot.
Mm.
And I remember one day I was at this lesbian bar in Seattle. I think it was called the Wild Rose, and I would hang out there a lot. And I would get approached sometimes, but it would never be by the people I was like interested in. I think like, I don't know. It wasn't working out. And then after one time of like talking to this girl and kind of being told like, oh, you're not really my type. This is so bad, but like that day, so I left, and I remember just standing outside of the the bar thinking, I think I'm just gonna date men for right now.
Yeah, I've been scarred by all these, all the no's.
Yeah, and so I did, and that was just such an interesting journey, because right after that, then I went into like immediately after that, I went to sugar dating, and then I started escorting, and then it just kind of like
went from there.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of, I guess, I like sold my underwear for a little while. I did like some of that little paid stuff, or what was that, Seeking Arrangements?
Yeah, that's where I started.
Yeah. So was it really, because you said you grew up really sheltered. So did you feel like really empowered kind of leaning into that energy, or was it ever tough for you?
It was a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically like I grew up in a cult, and was very like, being like raised as a girl, being told like your only value in life is to have kids and get married.
Did you say you grew up in a cult? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, it was. It's not like a known one or anything like that. It was one that basically my stepfather made up, and that's what I grew up in. Like he created his own religion and had these very like self-serving rules, I guess, that we had to follow. And it was a lot of brainwashing, a lot of conditioning. And so by the time I became an adult, it was really difficult for me to like unlearn that. I didn't identify with being a female at the time. So I had a lot of confusion with my body and my sexuality. And, at that time I thought like, by the time I became sexually active, I mean, I was like 20, I thought that sex was something that was done to me, not something that I was an active participant in. And so when I started sex work, that was the first time that I actually had agency, like, over my body. Like, even when I was in that first relationship, I think I was a pretty passive person. I was very curious. Like, I explored a lot, and, I learned a lot about myself, about my sexuality, but it wasn't in a safe space. And ironically, doing sex work gave me the safe space to do it. Like, I was empowered, but at the same time, I felt kind of dirty, but then also kind of like naughty. I don't know. It was a very confusing time for me.
Yeah, but you've stuck with it, right? Or did you go in and out for a minute, or have you always kind of been in?
Yeah. So I would leave when I would get into a relationship. So I would be on and off for like, I'd have a 2-year relationship, so I'd be off for 2 years, or
is that just because the partner was uncomfortable with it?
Yeah, and I think that, like, I also felt that they would be ashamed of me. I mean, there was still this thing that I had about being perceived as dirty. And I think, like, I wouldn't even tell them that that's what I was doing before. I mean, I would be safe, of course, but, like, that was just something I was sort of ashamed of. And so my relationships would suffer because of it, because, again, like, not having those boundaries and not knowing who I was, but then being in a relationship, it just was, I don't know, it was kind of traumatizing. And so after we would break up, I'd go right back to it, and then I'd find my power again. It was like this interesting sort of dynamic that would happen.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
You perceive so much self-love, like, out there in the world, though. So how did you find this love for yourself? Like, when did that start?
Yeah, I mean, it took a really long time for me to figure it out. I thought for the longest time that I loved myself, but I would say within the last, like, 4 years, I realized that I didn't love myself as much as I thought I did. And that was pretty evident in the relationships that I would choose. I would subconsciously search for validation and search for love and search for praise. I'm pretty sure because it was something that I never received growing up. And so I would look for it in partners. And I think because I had that desperation, I would constantly attract people who took advantage of it. And, so I've been single for about 4 years now, 4.5. And it's been which is the longest time because I would always, like, jump from relationship to relationship because I constantly needed validation. And, after being single for 4.5 years, it's been eye-opening. Like, I actually got to sit with myself, and rather than constantly searching for the love and outside validation, I found it within myself. And then I also kind of, like, took a break from, like, clients and sugar dating and things like that, to really, like, focus on myself. And then at one point I even went celibate, which was, I wanted to see if I could do it. And I think, like, again, like, that shame kind of started creeping up again, because I felt like at the end, when I finally broke my celibacy, I realized that I actually like slut shamed myself into celibacy, and I didn't do it for the right reasons. So
So you weren't even, like, masturbating or anything during that time fully?
No. And even masturbation actually was something that I quite literally never did. I tried once 8 years ago, and then I never did it again.
You've never done it since?
Yeah, I just couldn't. It was like, it's shame. It's amazing how, like, on social media, like, I think people perceive me as this very, like, self-assured, full of self-love. But I think that it was a bit of that, but shame. And it was like this perfect marriage between the two. Like, I internalized so much of it, but then I had no problem, like, posting it or talking about it. It was very interesting. Like, because I sat with myself so much, and it was like this constant battle. But yeah, masturbation also was, like, a thing that I think growing up, being told that it's a dirty thing to do, and then also with the fact that, like, I could not accept the fact that I had a vagina. In fact, when I would look in a mirror, I would see pixels. And then for the first time I looked at it, I was probably about 24 years old. I took a mirror and I looked at it, and I was like, okay, I have this and this is what it is. And that was also like part of my like sexual revolution, I guess. But yeah, I still don't do it.
You still struggle with that.
I don't think for me, I don't see it as a negative thing, or I don't see it as like a source of shame. It just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
But I did find that like masturbation doesn't necessarily have to involve penetration. It's more like self-soothing, I found. And so I guess in a way I kind of do, like if I'm sleeping, I will sort of like caress my shoulder or like touch my arm. That can be a form of masturbation, I guess. And I just found that out from, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I started taking this class on somatic sexology and I was reading about masturbation and I was like, oh, okay, I never really thought of it that way. But yeah, I guess in a way. But as far as like penetration goes, no.
I never really penetrate myself when I masturbate. It's mostly like vibrators. Mm-hmm. And I don't like put them inside me. I just like put them outside, like on my clit. And for me, it's been like a very healing experience. Or even like when I'm stressed, like it feels like it's like a release for me, which is kind of like the somatic sexology vibes, right? Like those are talking about like somatic releases, right? Like letting go of like energy that's stuck. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting. It's also something if you're just not into it, then don't pressure yourself into it. It's kind of like some women, I find it so shocking that some women don't like receiving oral sometimes. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's like similar, you're just not really into it.
You know what? I think you're absolutely right. Like when I would be with women, I would never let them go down on me ever. But I think again, there was like that huge disconnect that I felt with my genitals. And yeah, now that I've gotten over that, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, like and that was like over 10 years ago. So it's like all this time I've been missing out on these incredible experiences. But I always think it's like better late than never.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And you also, you love bondage too. Mm-hmm. I see you in rope a lot, which I love. What was your like journey to BDSM like? Was that like adjacent to your sexual awakening or your career path? Like, how did that feel?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, that was like also another time of like major isolation. And there was just so much that was going on and I needed answers. And I think that was around the time when I had like this like spiritual awakening. I knew that I didn't want to be like weighed down by the trauma, by my insecurities, by all the things that sort of made me what I thought was me. And sexuality has always been like a huge part of that. Like my gender has always been a huge part of that. And it was, so one day, like I was on Bumble and I had matched with this guy and we went and had coffee and we started talking and he was like, yeah, like I run this sex club. And I was like, oh, like I was super intrigued. I've always been curious about it, but I was never sort of like in the way of like being involved. Like I didn't know people who were involved or people who were in the kink community or were in bondage or anything like that. And so when he was telling me about it, I was very intrigued. And so he took me to my first party and that's what literally changed my life. Like to see like all these people and like consent and, I saw one person on the St. Andrew's cross getting whipped and I was like, this is so cool. Like it's so different than what I imagine.
Grew up.
Yeah.
It's very, but what were you going to say?
Or even just like TV. Like when you think about like 50 Shades of Grey and I don't know, it was just so different. But like watching that, it changed my life and it was very empowering. And I was surprised that I didn't get triggered because, growing up, we were beaten quite a bit. And so watching that, it didn't trigger me at all. And so that was sort of like my first like real experience to BDSM. I've had people say that they were into it and then it was like not that at all. It was more like abuse. And so this was the first time that I had ever been in an environment where I was safe, I was respected, I was welcomed. And then shortly after that, I met my first dom, and that was like another level to like my sexual evolution. And he quite literally changed my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He gave me my first orgasm, actually. I was like 28, 29, something like that.
Wow. Your first orgasm, was it like penetration, like an internal orgasm? Do you or like an external clitoral one?
To be honest with you, I've been asked that, and to be honest, I can't quite remember. It was so much sensory that everything sort of like melted into one.
Mm-hmm.
He like, so I was like tied up, like it was just everything. And he's like a pleasure dom. And so that was the first time that I've ever been intimate with someone where I actually felt like loved and respected, and like he took an extreme amount of care for me. And the orgasm lasted forever. Like it was like this, I would say like probably a good 5 minutes of like this thing. And I've heard of orgasms, and I thought that I knew that that's what it was, and I thought that that's what I had been having prior to that. But when it happened, I was like, oh my God, like this is what people talk about. Yeah. And it was just like, it was so amazing. I'm pretty sure it was like penetrative. But it was just with the combination of everything happening, like him talking to me in my ear, like the whole praise, because I realized also that like I have a praise kink as well. Mm-hmm. So like in combination of that was like,
yeah, body amazing. Worship, being praised. It was probably like a full energy, full energy orgasm or something, combination of it all. Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. Have you had a bunch of those since then? Like,
no, he's the only one. And and after that, because I think the bar was set so high that like I was like, I cannot have anything, like I can't accept anything less than this. And I've talked to people, but it was even just talking, I can already tell that it's not going to be on that same level. So I haven't found anyone yet. But I'm still hoping.
Yeah, one day you will.
Yeah,
I know you will.
But I'm just so glad that it happened, because it's like that's another reason why I started my brand, was because I can only imagine actually how many people who are just like me, who want to explore kink, and who don't understand what BDSM is. And then there's all this like negative stigma behind it. You want to explore, but you don't have like the community or the space or like the education. And it can feel isolating. And yeah, so knowing that I've gone through that, like I want to be able to help people kind of get there too.
Yeah, it sounds like similarly to me, like your journey is what you're giving to other people, mm-hmm. Like you've learned your lessons and now you're able to like share that with everyone, which is just so inspiring. I'm sure you've helped a lot of people.
I hope so. If I could just help one person, like that would mean the world to me.
Yeah. Let's talk about your brand. It's like so incredible. So obviously you said you went to art school. So mm-hmm. do you design all the lingerie and all the pieces and everything?
Yeah. So I went to school for fashion design, but it was very brief. And so I thought that making lingerie was easy. And it wasn't until like after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, actually, everything was shut down. I couldn't tattoo. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. And I had no idea how long it was going to last, but I realized, okay, like who knows how long I'm going to be sitting here. And I was just sitting in my apartment one day and I was like, I need to do something. And I was like, okay, I've always wanted to have my own lingerie brand. And that kind of started because like my very first boyfriend actually was the one that sort of like introduced me to, or the concept of like gender inclusive lingerie. So when I first got with him, again, this was my first boyfriend, so very new to sexuality, very new to just about everything. I would come home from work and I would see my lingerie on my bed or like somewhere where I didn't put it, but it would be super stretched out. And so instantly I was like, he's definitely wearing it. And
boy, what are you doing with my lingerie? Give me a show.
I could definitely tell he's wearing it. I mean, I'm tiny. He's like 6'4", pretty, like pretty big guy. And I was like, oh, he's definitely wearing it. And so we talked about it. He denied it for a really long time. It was like 2 months, I think. And then finally he was like, yeah, I wear this. And he told me about like his, desire to transition to be a woman. And I was very supportive about it. And I was like, that's great. And I was like, that's perfect because I actually like women anyway. So this works out for me. And so I offered to buy him his own lingerie. He went as him at the time. But yeah, anyway, so I was looking for lingerie to buy him. And I could not find anyone. I couldn't find any male bodies in lingerie. Like when I was like searching for lingerie, you see like these very thin women or, just, it wasn't that. And so I told myself one day I'm going to have my own lingerie brand. It was like literally like 12 years ago. I was like, one day I'm going to have my own lingerie brand and I'm going to cater to every body, every gender, every, everything. And anyway, that's literally how like Dahlier started. So I started out with lingerie and I guess it was more like a passion project. I didn't really know what I was doing. I taught myself how to make the patterns from YouTube. I watched a bunch of videos. I read a bunch of books. And then, I don't know, it felt like it wasn't quite there yet. And then right after that, then that's when I started going to the play parties. And then I introduced like sex toys and like BDSM accessories to the brand. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. Like, this is what Dahlier is, like education, basically.
Yeah. And you have bondage cuffs and things like that. And like a lot of, kinky stuff as well as lingerie. And it's also beautiful. Yeah. I was very impressed by it. That's like a dream of mine is to create a sex positive brand, like I definitely have like some ideas. But yeah, I mean, that just seems like so difficult. That's really impressive that you taught yourself and are crushing it.
Thanks.
Well done.
Thank you. It's definitely still like, it's still a learning experience. I mean, I'm learning every single day.
For sure.
I think that kink and BDSM is still very much a taboo subject. And so like when you're starting out like in that brand, and this is like my first like big like project, I'm learning a lot. And so like, I think education is really what's going to be something that's going to get people more comfortable with it, which is why like I decided to pursue my education in somatic sexology because I want to be able to teach, but then also like learn as much as I can. Basically like just, I want to challenge the stigma behind sex and kink and just about everything else like in that umbrella.
Yeah, that's my goal too. And I believe I'm doing it little by little with these episodes. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely are.
Do you feel like it's really helped you and healed you, like especially with how you grew up and what you've been through? Like, could you explain how that's felt? Like if there's been any healing experiences?
Yeah. So my first like actual experience, like one-on-one was with my dom. And it was so funny because as a child, we were definitely physically abused. And I think that has a lot to do with like a lot of the shame and the trauma that I was kind of like going through. And at that time, I figured like BDSM is like whipping and like abuse and all these things. And I was still curious. Like I still had an open mind and I still wanted to see like what that was about. Like I never wanted some like my own like negative thoughts to kind of like get in the way of exploration. I've always been a very curious, explorative person. And so when I met him, I kind of told him a little bit about like my past and my childhood, and he was very understanding. And it was so funny because like we started talking in February, and it was like during Black History Month, and I was like, he's white, and so we started talking about like, oh, like I'm going to whip you, and like all these things. Like he was like kind of describing what he would do and asking me if I would be okay with it. But it was during Black History Month, and I just felt like I thought maybe I shouldn't like be doing this. So I decided to wait until the next month, March. And so that's when I had my first experience. And he was just so kind and so gentle and so understanding. And, you know, when I was getting like whipped and we also had like the crop and the paddle, I didn't have any flashbacks. And that was something I was really worried about having. I didn't get triggered. I was like, oh, and even in the middle of it, I stopped and I was like, oh my God, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And he was just so like gentle and so understanding. And I loved it. And I was like, okay, now I don't think that like my trauma and the abuse that I went through is like directly connected to like my exploration of BDSM. It might have something to do with it a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm reliving the trauma. It's not something that like my brain is like, you know, becoming addicted to, because that can happen. Like I think that people can definitely tend to relive those traumatic experiences, and it becomes very addictive and unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case for me, and it wasn't. And so yeah, so with him, like he has like really taught me a lot about like being submissive, and I think that's where I tend to sit, although I do consider myself a switch, but I think I definitely lean more towards like the submissive side. And it's just been so healing. I mean, ironically, being tied up and having like, you know, being bonded has given me more freedom than I ever imagined, like in everything that I do. So yeah, it's been extremely healing for me. And I'm still on that journey. So I can only imagine like where I would be, you know, a week from now, a month from now, or a year, who knows? But it's like this constant flow of growth.
Yeah, well said. Wow, beautiful. It's I have to say, you know, listening to your body during the, you know, even if it's just, you know, you think it's weird or feels different, like with the Black History Month thing, I think that's such a good lesson to just like listen to yourself. If something feels off, like wait, you know, because anytime your body isn't fully in that flow state or feeling, just feeling fully right, like trust your intuition and then lean into it. And just to hear that you've experienced so much growth through it. It's so common. And that's something that I try to illuminate in the space, is that pleasure can be so healing.
Absolutely.
And BDSM in general can be so healing. But there's such a negative stigma, I think, like what you thought when you were introduced to it initially. And it's nice for people to realize like, no, this is actually like a really beautiful space.
Oh yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I learned too was having boundaries and consent. That was something I quite literally never had. Like I never, even as a child, like, you know, I didn't have boundaries. I wasn't allowed to have boundaries, and consent was like not a thing. And so by the time I became an adult, these things would happen to me, like, you know, being assaulted and there was even more trauma based off of that. Like when it happens once, it happens again and again and again and again. And for the first time being in this community, I understand what consent is. Like I have agency over my body. I can say no. And that was something that it was a completely foreign thing for me. And I think that a lot of people who are unfamiliar with BDSM don't really associate BDSM with consent and with respect. Mm-hmm. And that's actually
all it is.
That's exactly what it should be. Yeah.
What would you tell someone that feels like, you know, either lost in their boundaries or lost in their, you know, gender expression or any of that, you know, like how to move forward?
Well, one thing that helped me was therapy. I didn't see therapists specifically for those reasons, but at least for me, like therapy helped me a lot kind of figure out why I was doing these things. And it helped me figure out, okay, like my trauma is affecting me in this way, and this way, and why I was making all of these decisions. I think for anyone that is like interested in exploring BDSM and wanting to learn their boundaries, is to really kind of like sit with yourself. Therapy is super important, but then also to like sit with yourself and like ask yourself like, why do I like this? how will this help me? Like, I don't know, like asking questions just to make sure that this isn't something that's done in a harmful way. Because sometimes, like, we think we want something, but then it's like, I don't know, it could be harmful for someone like abusing alcohol or abusing sex. Like, and that was something that I did for a long time. And then I actually had to pull myself away from it and really sit with myself and like talk to myself and ask myself these questions. Like, why am I doing this? Is this helpful to me? And then also like communication too is super important. If you have a partner or partners, communication is incredibly important. And just like knowing your boundaries and being comfortable with expressing that is hands down like the most like paramount thing you can do.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks for all that. Do you feel like you have any like self-care practices that you do like daily or weekly that really help you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what works for me might not work for everyone, but for me, self-care is super, super important. And I try to incorporate that in my daily routine, pretty much in everything that I do. So for me, self-care is like if I'm feeling super anxious, I would go and get I'll go to my favorite coffee shop, go get a latte and disassociate for a good hour. Like to me, that's self-care. Or like taking myself to dinner or taking a nice bath or meditating. It's really important to check in with yourself, especially if you've gone through a lot of trauma and your way of sort of like moving past that is disassociating. And that's something that I have done for a very, very long time. And when you disassociate, you're not always like aware of what's going on in your body. And so like you can have encounters or you'll be like in an intimate situation and you're uncomfortable or you're being abused, and sometimes you won't even register it because you're so disassociated from your body. You're just like, it's easy to just let it happen, and then like when it's done, you're just like, you feel the aftermath of it, and then you probably will disassociate again. So it's like really important to just be connected to your body, to check in. And self-care is like the most important thing. I mean, I don't know how anyone can go about life without, or at least in a way where it's enjoyable without self-care.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest things I try to remind people of is to focus on yourself and give yourself what you feel like your body needs. And yeah, the disassociating thing, that's so fascinating. I had an experience at a young age where it was weird. Like later in life, I felt like I didn't realize until, like I was disassociated. I'm struggling with my words right now, but, but it was like, oh my God, like looking back, like I felt so disconnected to my body. I felt so out of my body. And I didn't even like remember that kind of relationship because it all started with this kind of traumatic situation. And so it's a good lesson for everyone because especially women, I think more so. I mean, of course, maybe not like everyone experiences their own situations, but to remind yourself to like stay present with your body and worship your body, love your body, all of that.
Absolutely. The body keeps score, like whether we realize it or not. Like it's just so interesting. Like we all definitely deal with our issues in a very different way, but I think one thing that's been major, like super consistent, is the fact that our bodies keep score. And when we're disassociating, it's like we're just like packing on more and more of that. And it's hard to kind of like break through it. So yeah, being present is something that I still kind of struggle with it every once in a while, but every day it's getting more and more, it's getting a lot easier.
Yeah, I often tell people like, even if you can sit with your body for like 2 minutes and just breathe deeply and feel, then even that 2 minutes is going to help your day so much better. Because we just brush things under the rug and we go about our day and we disassociate, we disconnect, we try to, forget. And even just sitting with yourself for a couple minutes, I think is like a great place to start too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Do you feel like Do you feel like turned on by yourself now? Like, I wanted to ask you that because some of your comments lately, I'm like,
oh my God, yes. Oh, it's just so funny. The second I sort of decentered, looking for love outside of myself is when I really like fell in love with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because like I look at a mirror and I don't really see like a person. I see like an entity. Like I see like a soul. And I'm so in love with it. Like I'm so proud of how far I've come. I'm so glad that I'm like, despite everything that's happened to me, that I still have so much love to give and so much love for myself and so much love to share. Like I'm so grateful, and I seriously love myself. It's not every day. Like some days I do wake up and I'm like, I feel like a fucking troll. And then, the next day I'm like, oh, I'm such a goddess. Like, it's just this interesting thing. But yeah, I want everyone to feel that way about themselves.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible feeling. And when you feel it, everyone else around you feels it. And it's like this infectious energy. And I just think it's, I don't know. I love it. And I hope that, the more I keep working on it, the more I won't like go back to how I was feeling before. But yes, I absolutely love myself. And, like little parts of me that I would previously ignore or I would overlook. Yeah, I love all of me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's important. I feel like once you love yourself, you're right. It's like a ripple effect and everyone else around you is just it's like that infectious energy. It's such a great feeling. And I want everyone to love themselves too. So I'm always like, yes, love yourself, look at yourself in the mirror. And yeah, it takes a journey. It takes a lifetime sometimes, and it's a continuous effort. But once you feel that, it's like, oh, it's so good.
It really is.
But yeah, I could sense that in you. Maybe it was just like some of your posts and stuff, but I was like, I feel like she gets turned on by her energy. Like I get turned on by my energy. And I feel like sometimes women don't like acknowledge that. But like sometimes I look at pictures of myself. I'm like, damn, like I'm turning myself on.
I'm so glad that comes across because like I never know how my photos come across because I feel it's so weird. Ever since I started like posting these photos, I feel like I get this mixed like energy of people like supporting me and then kind of like, oh, like, so it's hard for me to like navigate and like figure out where I sit. I mean, I'm still going to post. I mean,
you gotta do it for yourself.
Yeah,
there's a lot of weird energy out there. It's hard to, you gotta just kind of focus on the good stuff. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about your tattoo career too, because you are an incredible tattoo artist. And are you into pain, like in the sexual space, or because I feel like maybe those might be linked because you like also are covered in tattoos.
Yeah. So when I was out of that childhood situation, I left the house. I felt super lost. Like I didn't have an identity. I didn't know who I was, what I was supposed to be, because I was basically brainwashed to be like my mother, basically. And I knew I was not that. I didn't want to be that. And, at the time, a lot of it was for like aesthetic purposes, but then I needed something. I needed some like outlet. So I was like 90 something pounds. I had a hard time developing like full sentences. I was extremely awkward. And I discovered like tattoos. And so I would basically go into the shop every week. So like pretty much half of the work that I have now, I got in about a year of going to the shop every single week, getting tattooed. And I figured, okay, this is me writing my story on my body rather than on a piece of paper. I was like really big into like journaling and poetry at the time, but it just wasn't doing it for me. So I needed to put it on my body. And when I started getting tattooed, I was so into the pain. Like I loved it. And I think that was another reason why I would come in, because I would get like these like mini, like, I wouldn't say orgasms, but I would get like like really wet, like while I was getting like tattooed. And I just kept coming back. And then the older I got, the less that became. Like now I'm like, I'm not super into getting tattooed because like just like fucking hurts. And there's no like sexual anything gratification coming from that at all. I like how it looks, and it's a fun thing for me to do, like, when I'm traveling and stuff like that. But yeah, I was going in every week to get that fix. And it was just like, it was amazing. And then when I got into actually becoming a tattoo artist, my relationship with tattoos changed. I saw it as more of a way to like connect with people. And I think that that's why I still love it to this day. Like, I love the fact that I get to connect with people, and it's such an intimate experience, and we're a part of each other forever. Like, I'm a part of them. Like, they're a part of me. Like, I just think it's such a beautiful, like, friendship dynamic, and I love it. I really do.
Yeah, it's a beautiful connection, of life. So that's kind of why I like doing what I do. How I make money is just bartending and serving and working in the service industry. Yeah. And the biggest part of that job, which I've done for, over a decade, is that it's like you get to connect with new people every day. And yeah, similarly, it's like, maybe I'm not a part of them for life like you are, but it's like, okay, I made their night, or I'm a part of their evening. And it's just like, it feels special to some way. That's what I love about it most. Yeah, I totally get that. That's actually where I started before I started tattooing. Okay. I was like, I worked in like front of the house and like bartender kind of, and I loved it. And believe it or not, you actually are a part of their lives like forever, because like those memories, like you're their favorite bartender. Like, yeah, there's so many things for sure. Yeah, the regulars definitely. So have you tattooed yourself at all? Yes, I have. I actually started out tattooing myself. Like, when I realized I wanted to become a tattoo artist, I bought a machine on eBay, and I actually started with this arm, and then I was like, okay, I suck. And so I took a break. I mean, I tattooed a few people here and there, but I was just not good. Oh my God. And so I, pursued an apprenticeship. No one would take me. And then I think I pursued for like 2 years, and then I was like, okay, well, I need to get like a job. And so I worked at Nordstrom for about 4 years while still pursuing an apprenticeship. And I didn't get to my first shop until 8 years after. Wow. Yeah, 8 years. I was told no, and I kept going. Persistence and consistency. It's a good lesson too. So yeah, you are in a shop now in LA, and your work is incredible. I love it. Thank you. I've always loved tattoos. I'm a clean slate, but you are. I am, and I'm not going to get any. I like being the clean slate. Don't get any ideas. But my partner he has several, and he's always talking about wanting to cover his body, but it's just, it's an expensive hobby and expensive art. But I have always been very attracted to tattoos, and they look really good on you. So Thank you. You're welcome. So much. You're welcome. Well, I would love, I want to hear about your last sweet release story before we let you go. Yes. But tell us that last time you had that sweet release. It was actually at a play party, maybe like last month or so. And oh my God, yeah. So I think it was a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, I was invited to do this photo shoot, and it was like an OnlyFans shoot. And I guess I misunderstood what an OnlyFans shoot was. So when I got there, it turns out it was actually like a porn shoot. And I was super stoked because it was something that I've always wanted to do. But again, there was like that shame and guilt that I had. And I was like, oh, what if people find it? Then I'll be shamed even more, like all, this whole thing. But I told myself that if I was given an opportunity under the right circumstances, I would do it. And I was like, one of my friends I found actually on Instagram, who's a fellow adult actor, he introduced me to some people, and then and that's how the shoot started. And I didn't have the release during the shoot, but after, it was like this incredible play party, and it was just so many different kinds of people. And I think what made that play party different than the others was just,
I think for one, like coming from like doing my first film, like adult scene, and then just meeting such incredibly genuine people. Everyone was super welcoming, and it was a different group than what I had been involved with before. I'd been kind of, it's a kind of a small world, actually. Like you go to one club and then you see people from like a previous club, and you know, we all like intersect at some point, but this was a completely different crowd, and I met so many incredible people, and yeah, I hooked up with a few people. I don't remember who exactly. It was kind of like a blur. I hooked up with some women, some guys, and then at one point there was this one guy that I did end up hooking up with, and that's what it was. And then that's when I had like my last like sweet release, and it was great. Everyone was just so nice and just incredible.
I love that. Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
So good. And you do have like some spicy content in your brand. Do you want to like maybe just tell people that are just listening? I'll link everything below, but if they want to find you and
sure, with
shop
Instagram?
on your brand or anything, whatever.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you guys are interested in any ethically produced small batch BDSM accessories, you can check out my brand Dahlier. It's spelled DAHLIER.com. And then if you want to see some of my spicy content, it'll actually be my OnlyFans, and it's be the link in the bio.
Yeah. Awesome.
Under Vudu Doll. So it's VUDU_DAHL.
Yeah, and I'll link that below too for everyone. But
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. You have such lovely
me.
energy, and I'm so glad I got to meet you and have this chat. And hopefully we continue kind of destigmatizing this world that is still these things that are still so taboo. And I'm glad we're both on that path.
Me too. And I'm so glad it's finally becoming more of like a mainstream thing. I mean, like 10 years ago, like I feel like this would have been such a, I don't know. I'm glad that people are finally like talking about it now.
Yeah, I do feel like it's happening, and I hope it continues for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Ruth. She was actually my first exposure to that too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of those old school women, I'm like, yes, you were powerful. I wonder if we'll be like that.
No, we totally are. We're on the path. Definitely.
Well, thanks, sweets, for listening. Thanks for coming back. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and be sweet to yourself always. Love you guys. Talk soon.